Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Buck Doyle, and I'm an alcoholic. Yeah. And my higher power, operating through you folks and my sponsor, I haven't had a drink or any mood-changing chemicals since January the 4th, 1954. It's a beautiful day here. Before I forget it, I want to thank the committee for inviting me out here because I usually do forget. And, of course, I've been preceded by three wonderful speakers, Jane and Sandy and Sue. And I appreciate what they have done because it's a continuation of sharing. And I saw so many similarities in even the Al-Anon story. And this is one of the great things of AA. I want to give you some good news on this beautiful morning. Everybody in this room has already done the smartest thing you'll ever do in your life. Now, I wouldn't have believed this, even after I'd been here several years. But believe me, it's true. With hindsight, it's true. The smartest thing I ever did, and I think the smartest thing any of us do, is to get to AA, no matter how it happened. If it happened because the cops caught us with something, well, we deserve credit for getting in that trouble enough for the judge to send us here, you know. And if we got in trouble at work, that was one of the smartest things we did because it got us to this program. And it is smart. And I have done a lot of smart things, and so have y'all. All of us are survivors, and so have everybody here done a lot of smart things. But you won't believe it now, but you have done the smartest thing by getting to your first AA meeting, no matter what has happened since. I also have the chance now to do the most stupid thing I can ever do in my life, and that would be to disaffiliate from this wonderful magic program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, to tell you how smart I was, actually we tell our history, but I like it, our drunkalogs and all of these things, because we're sharing our experience. But really, we could really simplify this thing down, and I was told a story that tells me how AA is. It seemed this young Indian brave was so terrible and so drunk all the time on the reservation that all the other members of the reservation got together, went to the chief, and had him thrown off the reservation, never to come back again. Disgraced. And about 3 years later, they see a cloud of dust way off in the distance, and they run in. The news gets to the chief. It said, "He's back." Who's back? That bum, that terrible drunk. So, boy, this car gets closer and closer, and it's a beautiful Cadillac convertible. And here's the Indian brave in there, dressed all up like I am this morning. And he has this beautiful little Indian girl nestled close to him. And the chief comes out there and says, "How?" And he says, "Don't drink and go to AA meetings." And that's what it's all about. We don't drink and go to AA meetings. But I was one of 10 kids. That was a pretty smart move to be one of 10 because you didn't get too much supervision, yet you got some. I had a happy childhood. We were provided with everything we needed. I started drinking early. I was like Sandy, I hated school. I hated school. I never tell kids today, my nephews and so forth, I never say to them, "These are the happiest days of your life," because people said that to me, and I didn't like authority from the beginning, and I didn't like school. My family sent me away to a boarding school. Some people said it was a reform school, but it really wasn't. We didn't have delinquents in my day. We didn't have juvenile delinquents. We had people who were too big for their age and had red hair, and that was me. And every time we would do something, I was the one that would be spotted, and so they got me out of town. And down there, I started drinking at 14. I always get a laugh at how they get all excited in the papers today about the drinking in the high school. There was just as many deviants in my time drinking as then. But like Sue, I was different than the others. I really liked getting drunk. I really, that was it. And I need no psychiatrist to study me out and try to dig out why I drank like I did. I drank like I did because I liked to get drunk. Now, I wouldn't have said that before I met you people. I'd have been a little less honest, and I would have said something like, I like to tie one on, use some euphemism like, I think I'll have a couple of drinks tonight. But all of this, whatever I called it, meant getting drunk. And I still, to this day, can't understand why anybody wants to drink this stuff unless they are going to get drunk. I can't understand my wife taking one highball in an evening when there's all this free booze around. I say to her, can I get you another one? No, this is enough for the night. I can't imagine why drinking it. I really don't understand. People say, well, I don't like to get drunk. Well, then what do you drink it for? You know? Why don't they go out, just be smart? And if they don't want to get drunk, you go out and buy a king-size bottle of Coca-Cola, one of those big plastic bottles. But we don't endorse or oppose any. You can get Pepsi if you want. RC Cola. You have a big bottle. It's cheap. You can pour yourself a big hooker of it. You can drink it, and nothing will happen. Tastes good, smells good, sounds good, and nothing will happen. Might even invite some of the neighbors over for a shot. They'll never come back, but you can invite them over, you know. But that would be what I'd call intelligent drinking. But if you're going to put the money out, put your job and family on the line to drink that stuff, that real good old granddad and all, then you ought to have something happen to you. You ought to get some action. And even getting locked up. At least you got a memory of something happened for your money. But that's how I drank. I drank always to get drunk. But for many years, I was a happy-go-lucky drunk. It didn't seem to interfere with my life. It didn't seem to bother people close to me. As I got older, of course, when I was 14, 15, it bothered the family whenever I'd steal some of my father's stuff or something. But my drinking, most of these people that drank with me in school, I see them once in a while, the ones that are living, they still don't drink with any intelligence. They just dirty their breath out. This was not my problem. I drank, and I was successful. I married a gal, met her while I was drinking, and she's still with me. So what I'm going to say now is I've done some smart things to compare with the smartest thing I did. The war came along, and I ended up in the Army Air Corps, and I ended up flying with General Chennault and the Flying Tigers over in China. Now, you all wouldn't respect what the Flying Tigers were, because a lot of you probably don't even know. I was talking to Sue yesterday, and I don't think she knew who Humphrey Bogart was. But anyway, so I have to recognize this age gap. But we were hot stuff. We were John Wayne. You remember John Wayne? Do I look like John Wayne? Well, I thought I did, you know. And if you don't think we're hot stuff, some might look in on the late show, and you'll see the Flying Tigers, and then you'll know what I was talking about. But anyway, I had a successful career over there. I did a lot of drinking, but never while I was flying, and I think that's an important point. All this time while I was this happy-go-lucky drunk. When I drank, I got drunk, but I didn't offend. I didn't make an ass of myself in a sense that I'd be embarrassed the next day. My bosses all liked my drinking. When I drank, it was usually... In fact, my boss used to send us intermittently a case of good booze to entertain on. So I'm saying that at this time, I'm sure that although I believe I was an alcoholic from the word go, my alcoholism, the disease of alcoholism in my case, had manifested itself. All I was a guy that drank a lot, got drunk, but had a lot of fun. And I'd stay up all night if you all want to stay up. I'd go over to Baltimore if they closed up. I drank not only at home, I drank out. Some people only drank out. Some people only drank home. I covered the whole scene. And I was having a good time. Really having a great time. I was successful. I got back here. We flew 43 missions. Walked back through China. Had a lot of action. I loved it. I think that was an ideal time for the budding alcoholic, because here we got away from family responsibilities. It was all legit. We drank because tomorrow we may die. We were heroes, you know. And nobody objected, and it was a great time. Now, my friend Ernie, the attorney, who some of you have heard, a pigeon of mine, he says, Buck, when you get up at that podium, you are supposed to tell the absolute truth. And you're not telling truth when you tell them you're having a good time, because I know your history. I know what happened to you. And, Buck, you only thought you were having a good time. Well, I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, if you think you're having a good time, you're having a good time. That's what it's all about. Well, I got back here to the country quickly. They rolled out the red carpet. We didn't have the difficulties the fellows returning from Vietnam had. We were given everything. I mean, the whole country went crazy over us, you know. My company, Sperry Rand, who will not remain anonymous. I was with Remington Rand Division of Sperry Rand and had been with them before the war, and they rolled out the red carpet for Buck Doyle. And all of my buddies who hadn't been in the war had become big shots in the Sperry Rand structure, and they wanted to move me right up with them. We bought a home, started raising a family. I had one kid before I went overseas, and we started raising a family, and we started getting all the good things of life. My type of drinking went up, the quality of it. I only drank the best now because, of course, I'd drink anything. If I happened to be at your house, I'd drink the slop that you might have, but for myself, I'd get the finest stuff for me. And later on, I'll tell you, as you develop into alcoholism, I guess this was an early sign. When you were coming over to my house, I didn't want to waste good booze on you. So my wife used to give me hell. I had a little funnel, and I'd pour my cheap 3 feathers into my old granddad bottle for you, you know. I was very economical later on, but for a long time I was really a big shot, and things were just going great. I was making money, and everything was really nice. And promotion after I became the sales manager in charge of our government sales. Drinking plenty, drinking heavily, but never drinking on the job. That was my big thing. Alcoholics, I didn't know what the word alcoholic meant, but these drunks were people that got drunk on the job. I was not one of them. I was a dignified around town drunk, you know, but I didn't call myself a drunk. I drank rather heavy. But nobody was objecting. And then, of course, as you hear, I crossed that invisible line. I'll just tell you quickly about it, because now, after over 33 years of listening to you people, rehashing my life, just like I said, the early speakers brought things back in memory, I now know the exact date and place when I crossed over from being a heavy drinking, happy-go-lucky drunk, which I never called myself, to an alcoholic, to a sick alcoholic. And that was on February the 15th, 1947, at the Translux Cocktail Lounge down on Lower 14th Street in Washington, D.C. It's not there anymore. But the reason I know that on February the 14th I was not considered an alcoholic was that a sister of mine and my wife Dolly got together and planned a surprise party for me, a drinking party. Now, you know, by the time alcoholism shows up, the families aren't buying booze for us. If anything, they're letting the air out of the tires in the driveway so we don't go, and they're pouring it down in the sink or hiding it in some horrible place. But So I contend that because my wife and one of my sisters got together and decided to have a drinking party to celebrate my 30th birthday. Now, you save your time. I'm on the slope of 70s, but having fun. But anyway, they wouldn't have done that, would they, if I'd been doing the usual things that all of us are capable of performing, the action we can show them. And at that party on the 15th, Translux, I did all the things that were later on going to be a continuing project. Number one, I got nasty. I went into a blackout. I became what they call, if they ever call you a Jekyll and a Hyde, that's another term for an alcoholic. I became a Jekyll and a Hyde personality. I got in a fight. This had never happened, in a nice situation. Fights around, how you get in normal fights, But I had never done it when they were having a party or something. I got in a fight. The police were called. They were going to lock me up, but Officer Kurtz, of dear memory, was the leading money raiser for the Boys Club in Washington. I always gave him a big check, as most of us at Sperry Rand did. And he said to his partner, he says, Mr. Doyle is suffering from battle shock. He was close. It was bottle shock, A very dear friend who, to the day he died, never would allow me to make amends to him. I talked filthily, real obscenely to him and his wife. Real fine people. I liked, I hate that stuff where they say, you only said what you really think, And I think they said, in wine there is truth, vina veritas, biggest lie gone. But it's been said so often. A lot of our normal friends don't understand this. But I had often, maybe said things to somebody that I got very frank with that I didn't feel ashamed of the next day. I'd say, well, in a way, I'm glad I finally told him off, But this was where I hit somebody who was really kind to me and had given the company a lot of business on account of me. By the way, they never knew it, but they never again was to get any business from this area. It probably cost Sperry Rand a few $1 million in future sales. This guy would never buy anything from Sperry Rand after that on account of me. So we do damage in all areas. I ended up getting on a crying drunk. Now, I think that's one of the most humiliating things that can happen, is to start sobbing wildly. And for no reason at all. I didn't know I'd done it. And people said, did somebody, the next day, I saw you down Translux, you were crying, like, loudly. Did somebody die? Well, how can you explain to them you were just crying? I didn't even know I'd been crying. This is very humiliating. And you couldn't have convinced me the next day, though, that there was anything. I knew I drank too much, got out of order, a little bit out of order. I got a little bit out of order. That wasn't going to happen again, of course. And I meant it, and I thought everything was all right. I didn't drink for a few days after that. And then I went back to it. Well, here's the sick thing. Now, from this point on, there was no longer that happy-go-lucky. I didn't know this, of course. Nobody could have convinced me. But for the next almost 7 years, I drank sick. There wasn't this hail fellow well met. There wasn't this. But every time practically I drank, I'd end up in some embarrassing or humiliating situation. And dangerous situations, too. Boy, all of us, as I go back, sometimes I can remember times, and we all have it happen to us where being killed is a matter of inches or less, a close escape with a car, falling asleep, passing out. But tell me, I fell asleep, falling asleep at the wheel, and just coming to as you hit that divider, and that adrenaline shoots into your body, and you can stay awake for 2 days afterwards. You get in there. And this is how it Well, I often used to say, by God, they ought to have a way to give you a bottle of that adrenaline and let you take a shot of it after you take enough drinks, and boy, it'd bring you back in a hurry. But I probably wouldn't have brought it because I didn't want anything to sober me up, really, although I'd say I'd like to get sober. So anyway, this was the pattern of things were going, and after this, one thing, my upward, what they call upward mobility now, as Sperry ran, ceased. From February the 15th, 1947, for the rest of my career with Sperry Rand, I was never again to get a promotion. I held my job. I held a good job. The Korean War was heating up, I guess, and our business was good. My little daughter, I wouldn't have told them this, my little baby daughter could have gone to my desk and just gotten the mail in the morning, and these orders were coming in for which we get credited. In the sales field, we call those snowbirds. Any salesman, he'll tell you, don't know anything about them. But I was drinking real sick, looking back on it. And people started calling me in, talking to me about my drinking. My boss, who I'd always considered a dear friend, buddy, turned on me. He weighed over 400 pounds. He had now become a vice president of Sperry Rand. He had a voice to go with his 400 pounds. And he'd have me in the office screaming at me about my drinking. I was drinking on the job now, something I'd never done before. I used to, when anybody got fired for drinking on the job, I'd say, it serves them right. I like a little drink myself, but I don't bring it in. I had an older brother. And I'd say, by God, Bob, he later followed me into AA, and he, when they read that preamble and said our common problem, he used to nudge me and say, you sure were common. Because my sisters would call me up and they'd say, Bob's lost another job. He was blackballed in it. I'd say, drinking? And I'd say, yeah. Serves him right. I like to drink myself a little bit, but by God, it doesn't do that to me. The difference was, of course, is that I had very few bosses, and I could disappear from the office on business for periods of time. My brother had to be under the eyeball, so that's the only difference. But in those days, I was very outraged at his drinking. And I'd order him over from his Skid Row room. I'd order him to my house. I had a nice apartment. And I'd sit Bob down, and I'd put a bottle of Coke in front of him, and then I'd pour myself a double hooker of old Granddad, and then lecture him on his drinking. You watch around, there's nobody more intolerant than a drunk that's getting away with it. They're the worst, and I was one of them. I wouldn't let anybody work for me who was going to be drinking on the office. But later on, I was drinking in the office. Now, how do you handle it? This was really a breakdown of principles, because this was a principle that had been embedded in me by my father, who I greatly admired and liked, and he had his own business, and I'd go. He never drove a car, and I'd drive down, pick him up. We'd close the plant down. He'd sit me down, and then he and I'd have a drink together, and he'd say, "Now look. Even though I own this business, I don't have the right to drink on it because those people out there depend on me for a living. Never drink on a job." And since I admired him and liked him as a guy and everything, it was acceptable information. I just accepted it as a credo, that this is the way life should be lived. But like I think most of us do, we have a breakdown in these fine principles, but we can rationalize. And, being able to rationalize isn't a bad thing. Nature gave us this ability to rationalize, because sometimes in life we run across situations that are so impossible to intelligently face that we have to rationalize it to get through, to get the time. But we can abuse that just like you can abuse alcohol. And so I rationalized. I said, well, look, yes, I thought you were against people drinking on the job. I said, well, that's what you don't understand. This is getting to be a very competitive world. And in order to cut out a living for you people, I do drink, because this is, like I said, the doctors have a scalpel. Carpenters have their hammers and saws. Lawyers have their law books. And us salesmen have a 3-martini lunch. It's part of the business. Which was a damn lie, but I believed it. None of my customers drank with me. Most of them wouldn't go out to lunch with me because I'd embarrassed them with my behavior when I drank. Now, I didn't get drunk every time I drank. I don't want to give that impression. I drank many times and did a fairly decent job, behaved myself most of the time, I'd say. But where my real serious drinking problem came, I had reached this point, like I did at my 30th birthday, where after I took a drink, I couldn't predict what was going to come next. And sometimes nothing would happen, but many times I'd find myself locked up in jail. I'd find myself in a city not knowing why I was there. I'd find myself in some serious car trouble. And then I go along. That's why alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It lets us get away like out fishing. You know, you let the fish take a little, yank him and then play him a little bit. And that's how alcohol was with me. And that's why I could say, I wasn't like my brother Bob. I own a job. And I had my picture on the company magazine. I was president of the Century Club at Sperry, that's a sales club. And how could I be anything wrong with my drinking? But this 400-pound boss said I was. And whenever they call you up to give you hell on this, hi, Art, I'm glad you finally got here. You Tom boy. Omaha boy. Now, as soon as, if they call you in, they say, you're drinking too much. Agree with them. I'd say, you're right, Herb. I am drinking too much. But aren't we all with this atom bomb hanging over us? You're so right. Agree with him. He said, look, I'm not worried about the atom bomb. I'm worried about the way you've been coming in here and setting an example for the rest of these men. And by God, something's going to break somewhere or another, and it's not going to be me. I said, shh, hold your voice down. Hold it down, hell. Oh, God, Won't tell you the words he said because it's Sunday and we're in a beautiful chapel. But anyway, these were happening more and more until finally I was forced into AA. I didn't ask to come here. I didn't think I belonged here. And when I got here, I didn't intend to stay here. I knew this would be a good place for my brother. Why don't you all go over and talk to him? No, we were asked to talk to you. Well, I'll play along with him. I was catching it at home. I was catching it at the office. I was in all kinds of troubles. And I said, well, just to shut him up, I'm going to go along with it. So I agreed to go, and they brought a guy around who was to become a sponsor. I didn't like him immediately, but I got to see that he might have some decency in him because there was this priest and my wife and the stranger, all of them talking to me about my drinking. I was being humiliated, I felt. And all of a sudden, Charlie said, look, it's almost meeting time. Let's get out of here. So I'd go on any place to get away from that priest and my wife. And we got outside, and he said, look, Mr. Doyle, called me Mr. for the first and last time. Called me other things. He said, Mr. Doyle, he said, I don't believe it was right for me to come in there. I wasn't invited. And he said, the priest asked me to come along with him. And he said, apparently you don't have a drinking problem. You got a nice home. You got your family and all these goodies. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll drop you off down at your beer joint down Westover, and after the meeting I'll pick you up because I thought you were really getting too much. Here it is in the winter, and you're sweating like hell from that. I felt like I was being questioned about neighborhood break-ins, under the lamp. You'd have thought a normal person would say, that's a pretty nice guy. I thought, well, who does he think he's fooling? No wonder he has to be an AA. He's so dumb. Talking to me like that. I can see right through him. I know what his scheme is. He's going to drop me off down at the beer joint in Westover and rush back, pick up my wife and that priest and come down there and humiliate me in front of all of my friends. So I said, no, I'm a man of my word. I said I was going to AA, and I'll go to the meeting. That's how I went to my first meeting, full of anger, never intending, never wanting to sit again, and humiliated, and I was full of animosity. And so we went. I didn't particularly like the meeting. The people were too nice. They were too good. They were not my type of people. They were holy. I really felt, these people were so nice and to each other and everything else. I felt I didn't belong because I'm busy. I'm at home cursing and screaming and scaring the kids and everything else, and I visualize all these nice people, and I'm a hypocrite sitting in the middle of them. I could see them at home, and even at home they'd be saying, darling, can I go and get you a cup of coffee, sweetheart? Say, yes, baby dear. And I said, and then I'm going to go home and raise hell about having me to go to AA meetings. I felt like saying, unclean. Felt very uncomfortable until you wonderful people revealed your humanity to me. I'm a Catholic. We don't believe in divorce. But the best thing that happened to me in the beginning of AA was there was this wonderful couple who I visualized in these terms of endearment, and they got a divorce. And that made me feel I belonged. I said, by God, they're human after all. They're not. But I just hadn't seen so much nice people around. Everybody being good, nice to each other. I've seen people making forced conversations in business, and I've seen them at cocktail with a grouch on their face until they got a few drinks. But here, these people just struck me as unreal. So I stuck around, and I did stop drinking. I could stop drinking. As I say, my problem was after I started, I had my problem. I hadn't reached the point that I've worked with many people who are so addicted they need hospitalization, who are so addicted that they climb the wall without a drink. I hadn't reached that. Not any credit to me. I was on the way because I can see the steps going down now. But you people interceded and put a floor under or what they call now a safety net was sprung out for so I didn't drop all the way through. But I said to this sponsor of mine, how often are we going to go to these crazy things? And he said, well, you said you wanted the program, didn't you? I didn't. I didn't want it, but I said I did. Wasn't the first lie. He said, well, and you say you're a man of your word. You really want it? I said, yeah, because I didn't want him carrying tales back to the priest and my wife that I didn't want it. Didn't trust him too much. And he said, well, the more meetings you go to, the better foundation you'll build for your AA program. And I said, well, if that's the case, we ought to be going every night. My big mouth got me in trouble right away. And we started that. We started going every night. And I planned on staying there 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, I planned on quietly departing and going back with a lot of more care in my drinking things and all, and yet with the knowledge that down at work the boss thought I was in AA, and I still would keep my membership but go back to drinking. I'd still claim to be going to AA. That was my plan. But someplace in that 6 weeks' time, this program hooked me. And it's continued to hook me. I'll tell you, you think of an addiction. I may not be chemically dependent, but I certainly am AA dependent. I certainly recognize that I need the people in AA. Now, when I stand up here, I tell the exact truth. I try never to lie. Now, what I tell you might not be the truth, but I better believe it. And I sincerely believe that I've been privileged to know the greatest people in the world. I really believe that. There's a lot of great people out in the world, but I think the people in AA stand 10 foot tall over anybody. I even feel it's unfair to compare other groups of fine people with the people in AA because it isn't a fair measure. Because you people in AA are so great, so exciting, so wonderful. And we have a privilege of belonging to this wonderful fellowship. Now, since it's Sunday, I'm going to cover two things. I want to be sure Sue and Sandy make their plane, so don't worry, Sandy. Now, I have had a real happy, exciting life, far more exciting than the Flying Tigers. I mention that because to show, if we were just a bunch of people who nothing had ever happened to, and yet I know plenty's happened to everybody in here because I've shared in y'all's adventures to having gone to over 12,000 of these meetings in that time. That's conservative, over 12,000, and I don't say they were all great experiences, but I'm convinced I've learned something from every one of them, because it's a magic program, and we tell people, and for the new person, the reason we tell you to go to meetings and don't drink and go to meetings is because it's not that you're going to hear particularly one person that you're going to relate to, but the great variety of people who will share their experience with us. We pick up bits and pieces, maybe one word from a person. I couldn't deal with how could I be an alcoholic? Until I heard one word. There was a thing going around AA about 30-some years ago. Alcoholics are people that can't drink. And I said, oh, why don't you go and talk to that wife of mine? She'll tell you whether I can drink, or talk to that 400-pound boss. I can drink plenty. What are they talking about? Alcoholics are people who can't drink. And my sponsor said, look, we're going to the Southeast Convention conference. I said, look, I don't want to get involved in the politics of that thing. I called this that thing. He said, look, Buck, there's no chance of you being elected to anything. But he said, you might hear a speaker that'll help you. And there was this noted churchman. He was world famous, and he was an alcoholic, and he was speaking, and he brought up that very thing that he didn't like, that idea that was quite popular then. It didn't last like Easy Does It or anything, but at that time it lasted for a while. But he said, I couldn't buy that alcoholics couldn't drink, because I said, I can drink, but he would put my own words in when he was talking. He said, until I added one word to it. An alcoholic, he said, is a person who can't drink safely. And I said, that was the one word I needed, because I could drink, and many times, I told you earlier, get away with it, be nice, cunning, nice, but I couldn't do it safely because I could never predict what kind of a outcome would happen. So I started, and you get one word, you get a comma, you get a sentence from somebody. Sometimes you get almost your whole story, but it builds up, and things that you build your own sort of philosophy. All these little bits and pieces go up in this computer, and they round out to fit you, the words you had to hear. And all of a sudden you're up here talking, and you're learning things that you didn't even know you knew, And the funny thing is, you go to an AA meeting and not even listen, but you hear. The brain is a great computer, electrical computer, and every message that any of the senses send to it, see, I was in that field, send to it, are registered. Every license tag that's ever crossed in front of your eyes, Alabama, such and such, Maine, such and such, the color, the numbers, all are registered in your brain. You didn't know it, you weren't even looking, but your eyes saw it. But thank God they're in a locked vault, because otherwise up there you wouldn't have any room for anything but license tags. Now, if you remember out there in California a few years ago, there was a busload of kids kidnapped, and they buried the busload, and the driver finally got him out, and they didn't know anything, and so they hypnotized him, and they plucked out of that file a license tag that his eyes had seen, It happens to me. Whenever I smell new mown hay, reminds me of a circus my family took me to when I was about 7 or 8. And that smell of hay, there must have been hay around that circus grounds, and it still comes back. It collates. So if you go to these meetings, you start picking up this stuff, and sometimes you don't like the speaker. You aren't listening if you're like me. You're up there, you're counting all those rings in the pipes. It helps to pass the time, And then someday I'm out on a 12-step call, or I'm standing up here and I'm talking, and I say something that's brilliant. And I almost have to stop like an old TV ad and say, I didn't know that. What it was something that somebody said when I was being rude, probably not consciously rude, but rude enough that I wasn't listening, but my ears picked it up, and it was their message that they were giving me. So here in AA, I've been very happy, and for 30 years I thought AA was about drinking or not drinking, and it was a great way to think because it kept me very happy and sober. But 3 years ago, maybe a new person started me on another track of thinking, because I have a problem with a lot of friends outside of AA. They say, "You still go to those meetings with them drunks every night almost?" Yeah. Why? And I was wondering, well, why do I? It's hard to, I don't try to explain it to people because they wouldn't understand. Usually the reason I go is because some new person keeps me going. I go with the new person do a lot of 12-step work. Makes me go, and I'm very grateful for that. But then I started thinking about it. Well, why do I go? And some of y'all planned in there. Is because in AA here I get a continuing lesson, an education about two important factors. And when I was out at the Montgomery County Health Department, I used to ask the psychiatrists and psychologists, what do people pay you all that money for? What are they looking for when they come to you birds, And then usually the answer was, they're trying to find themselves. Well, you know what? I didn't realize it, but through listening to you people over the years, I have found I didn't know I was lost. But now I know Buck Doyle better than I've ever known him. I know things about Buck Doyle I never dreamt. I know some ambitions of mine that weren't valid, that I really didn't want. I found out simple things like I didn't have to have a new car every year, and I drove a piece of junk. Usually still drive junk around. All I want is transportation. I didn't want to become president or vice president of Sperry Rand. Would have driven me crazy, just the paperwork, because just like school, I didn't like work either. The reason why I liked being a salesman was because I was a free bird outside. So I got a great lesson that people out there pay big money for. You people have given to me about Buck Doyle. I know my limitations and I know my abilities. I know what I can do, what I shouldn't do, and what I will do. And I also know the difference of what I want and what I need. It's a great education. I'm comfortable with Buck Doyle. But then the second lesson that you get here in AA, and it's the only place we get this lesson, that I don't know of any other place, because it comes from having such a broad spectrum of people involved here from all walks of life that we would never have hit in our normal life. We would only hit people that were associated sort of in our own fields. So that the second one is how to live. And then I live to the fullest. I know how to live a day at a time and get the most out of a day than any of my outside friends know. But knowing how to live, and boy, there's people out there, them, that have everything apparently, and they still don't know how to live. They're miserable. They're unhappy. They could really stand a lesson, but there will be no reason for them. We are the fortunate ones that are forced to go to this school of life, of learning how to live. And living, you don't learn it and then put it in a package. I probably knew how to live when I was 10 years old. Maybe even through my teens, I knew how to live, changing things. In the 20s, so forth, married life, I learned to live. But it's a continuing thing, because I know one of my childhood heroes was Howard Hughes. There was a guy that had everything. He had more money than anybody in the world. He built and flew the most beautiful airplanes were ever built and set records with them. He was a good-looking guy, always had a bunch of starlets on his arms. He knew how to live. He saw a gal like Jane Russell over at RKO and he wanted to make time with her. He bought the studio. Yeah, that's living, man. He's doing it. He's like that guy in the Cadillac that left in his will, he wanted to be put behind the wheel of his convertible Cadillac and have a big derrick lower him down this big hole and bury him behind it. And they're doing that, and they're letting him down. These two grave diggers sitting on a pile of dirt there said, man, that's living, And that's how. But the day came when Howard Hughes forgot how to live. As the life changed and all, he slowly forgot how to live. And you know what happened to him. He finally ended up richest man in the world, took over a whole floor of a most expensive resort, ended up in there. I happened to have known a guy that was one of their attendants. A little steel bed with a little thin mattress. He didn't have a thick mattress because he weighed so little he could have bounced off of it. And he was there. His beard went down to his feet. Weighed about 80 pounds, and his fingernails were 6 inches long, covered with Kleenexes, so he wouldn't get contaminated. And he spent his life waiting for one of his attendants to bring him either a shot of booze or bang him with a needle in the arm. That's where he died. But say, if he'd had to come to AA, Howard Hughes would have kept up on his course of living and would be doing great today. So this is a program that is never any chance of it being dull. It's an exciting adventure. You're going to have a lot of fun here. You'll experience all of the parts of life that you have to go through. The A's can't stop the tragedies, which I've seen. I had a younger brother die from just drinking beer right under my nose. You lose dear friends and family members and tragedies and jobs, and AA can't stop it. But I'll tell you what it does, and I can tell you from experience. It buffers you. It takes the sharp blows away, and they sort of gentle you through these things that are bound to happen if you live long enough. So please, if you're new, give yourself a chance. Go to as many meetings as you can. I believe in going every night for the first 6 weeks, every night. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, if you just make a judgment. Well, to cheer you up, I'll tell you a couple of stories I heard that I like for a close. And one of them, these all come from AA people. One of them was a guy was saying that he at one time had to be reminded to go to meetings. And he said he reminded the psychiatrist walking through the grounds of the nut house, and he sees this guy laying brick. And he stops and he says, "My God, you're a tremendous bricklayer. That is beautiful work. You have a real talent there." He said, "In fact, I'd even say it's an art the way you do it. What are you in here for?" "Well, sir," he said, "my family didn't like me. They put me." The psychiatrist said, "Well, people shouldn't be put away in a nut house like this. You're a gentleman of great culture and calmness and talent." He said, "You shouldn't be put away for family didn't like." He said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do." He says, "Thursday morning at the staff meeting, I'm going to recommend that they discharge you." "Oh," he says, "Thank you, sir. Thank you, kind sir." And so the psychiatrist walking away, and this bird picks up a brick and throws it and hits the psychiatrist in the head. He said, "My God, man, what'd you do that for?" "Just to remind you of Thursday morning staff meeting." And then the other one was over in Ireland. You know, the priests over there have a lot of power with people. There was a drunk alcoholic, practicing alcoholic over there that was so mean, so nasty, so horrible to everybody. Never did anything for anybody. Always did things against people. Nobody could stand him. And he died. So at the funeral, the priest at a certain time in the Mass said, "Now, before we continue, I want somebody to come up here and say something good about Mike." Well, nobody moved. He says, "Now look, think it over, folks. Think it over with love. Come up here, somebody, and say something good about Mike." Nobody come up. So he said, "Look, I've got all day, and this service isn't going on until somebody comes up here and says something good about Mike." So this old Irishman comes up there with his cane, and he comes creeping up there, and he puts his hand on the coffin, and he looks at the congregation, and he said, "His brother was worse." So that's to cheer you up on this Sunday morning. Thank you all for having me here, and hope to see you soon again. I'd love to come out here and see Dick and Peggy. Thank you, and God bless you.